The Pieces Lie Where They Fell by Evil Humor. Chapter 4. Windbreaker. With a half-held-back yawn, Windbreaker shook his head as he began to wake up, and wince as he started to feel himself sobering. Rolling to the side to reach his pack, he reached inside and felt around for his light alcoholic bottle, as he had work today, thankfully. True, it was just some construction for the Honor Festival, but any work helped him pay his debts as a hatchery griffin, as well as give him some spending money for food, his drinks, and any surprise expenses or sudden splurges that came up. Tilting his head back as he sucked on the bottle, he kept a bit of his attention focused on how much he was drinking, just to get to that sweet spot where he could function. Pausing to check himself and see if the alcohol was working by doing his little test, Beaker promised himself he would try to deal with his problem tomorrow again. Feeling only a hint of irritation at his promise, Windbreaker let out a dry chuckle and said, "Well, I guess that's dealt with." Rubbing his throat after another stab of irritation, he dropped his bottle into his pack, clinking against the other bottles of booze, closed the flap, clicked it shut, and put it under the bed so it wouldn't be stolen while he was out. There was a chance it would still be there if he hid it or not, but better safe than stuck sober for a while. With a bit-back growl at his throat burning again, Windbreaker shook himself as he rolled out of bed, and spread his wings as he let out a proper yawn. Rubbing his eyes, he tilted his head back as he heard other griffins and workers for the festival waking up and chatting with each other in their own rooms. He grinned to himself. This had been one piece of luck that he got this room all to himself, despite how busy this time of year was. His room, and a few down the hall, were all singles for various reasons, ranging from heavy deposit, to a specialty client, to others refusing to bunk with the guy. His room. It seemed his reputation from the Caring Sisters of the Virtues hatchery preceded him a bit, and there were no takers joining him. He ruffled his reddish-gold coat and swished his tail as he thought of the hatchery. Even though the hatchery was one of the better ones in the upper, he still hated his time there, and got most of his issues from that place, like almost every other hatchery griffin he knew. At least he didn't have to dye his coat and feathers to a more pleasing and proper pony color anymore. Doing his utmost to refrain from taking another shot for courage, he picked up his proper saddlebags and went through it to make sure his papers were in place, his funds had been untouched, and his debt balance was still correct. As much as he would have liked it, his ledger remained untouched and unchanged since yesterday. Only an inspector could do that, and they were impossible to bribe. Partly due to their training, but mostly due to the fact that any change would appear in every other ledger as well as the master ledger, and a griffin could actually fight a false charge if such a thing happened. Which, again, due to ponies making sure their system seemed to be perfectly well thought out for all but the griffins that came from the hatcheries, was near impossible in itself due to the fact that ledgers had every hatchery griffin's magical signature embedded in it, and it was an easy process to check with just a plucked feather, consent or choice of which feather not always needed or asked. So having a false charge was all but impossible, and the ponies were able to tell themselves they were doing the right thing and nothing needed to change, especially not a system that was created over 800 years ago for a problem that no longer existed, that made second-class citizens because they were raised in a place that they had no choice in, that made them obligated to repay that kindness back their entire life, or else. That had made the free griffin's population smaller than the hatchery griffin, and hear constant talks about finally properly absorbing the griffin lands into Equestria by ponies and griffins alike. Windbreaker reached under the bed and took a drink from one of his stronger bottles, and started to gulp it down before stopping himself. Placing the bottle back, Windbreaker placed a talon over his head. He overdid it again, and he would need to be careful not to get caught. Lucky for him, he was good at not getting caught. With all that moping done for, he finally left the room, locked the door, placed the Do Not Clean sign on the door, and went downstairs to eat the provided breakfast meal before everybody else came downstairs. "Hey, look, it's little old Windbucker," Diamondback chuckled at him, with a couple of the other griffins from the hatchery, all sitting at a table near the prepared food that the Blade family had ordered for the workers. It was apple product, but free food was free food. "Looks like he woke up from his nappy," he mimed, drinking from a bottle before laughing again. "Very funny, Diamond," Windbreaker muttered, rubbing his throat as he went to grab a plate of food. "Just like the other times you made that joke." "You are sober, aren't you?" Diamond had suddenly moved over to Windbreaker and glared at him. For the longest time, Windbreaker and the rest of the griffins at the hatchery had thought that Windbreaker was just Shrimpy, but it turned out that Diamond and his friends were actually the large ones due to their heritage of being mountain griffins. They learned that when a free griffin had passed by. Diamond and his friends had gone right on with bullying him over everything they could, and due to his mouth, few other griffins in the hatchery defended him. "Sober enough," Windbreaker snapped, feeling it moving to a table away from them, but was grabbed by Diamond. "If you do anything to ruin this for us," Diamond growled threateningly, reminding Windbreaker that despite everything, Diamondback was still the lead griffin, and chosen as the lead griffin when their hatchery was chosen for something, and the caring sisters reached out to trusted griffins to do work in their name for a very slight decrease in their debts. And as lead griffin, his job was to make sure that no griffin messed up. "I'm fine," Windbreaker put more bite into his voice, ears slightly red as he could hear the slur in his beak. "Now let me eat my breakfast in peace, all right?" Diamond just glared at him, squeezed his shoulder harder before letting him go, and stalking back to his seat, keeping a fixed glare on Windbreaker and his saddlebags. As if he would bring a flask or bottle on the job. He wasn't a fool and going to risk his job by having alcohol on him in case there was a surprise inspection. If they did suspect, he could always hope they'd believe he had a speech impediment, or hope that Diamond would cover for him. Lifting a fork of the discount sausage to his beak, Windbreaker let out a tiny prayer to the goddesses that nothing would go wrong today. With a grunt, Windbreaker lifted the 2x4 and flew over to the back of the stalls, placing it next to the pile of other wood that Sharptack and Quicklist had brought in for Hardhammer and Sharpsaw to prepare them into proper roofing for walls of the unfinished stalls for the Honor Festival. He didn't know how the pony work crew failed to finish everything, as they had unicorns to help him, but there were no complaints from him. Any work helped clear his debt to the hatchery, and, as he wasn't a girl, he couldn't take the easy way out to clear his debts. He paused, perching on top of a stall, thinking of the so-called easy way. While it was open to every female griffin that went to a clinic, he could only count on a single talon how many female griffins he knew that got pregnant solely to sell their egg in exchange for the removal of a massive chunk of their debt. Windbreaker let out a tiny shiver at the horror stories of what happened to griffins that tried to back out of the donation path. The trials were always infamously nasty, and they always ruled against the griffin for stealing government property and jailed them. They also had their debts from when they had left their hatchery tripled, and had their debt passed down to their child as further punishment and deterrent for other griffins to try and break contracts with the government. Of course, that was just what happened in the upper, where things were prim and proper. It was supposedly far worse in the middle and lower. Still, he wasn't a changeling, and he had some rights, and they would be respected by the laws. If he was a bug, it would be a miracle if anyone helped him if he needed. Shaking his head, he looked at the pony couple walking through the festival and gave them an annoyed snort. He wasn't sure why the Blade family allowed what had to be their grandson to walk in with his mare friend when the representative from the Blade family was supposed to be around today. Maybe he sent the kid, it wasn't really a kid, had to be his own age, in first as some half-assed attempt at foal-sitting? He looked around the civilian festival, eyeing the stands already up and running for tonight's start, and wondered how they were going to pull it off. They hadn't even finished all of the curly things that were supposed to meet together above the Fountain of the Virtues. His ear flicked as he heard Diamondback talking to his friends as they took another break from the arch thingy, with supplies dangerously close to the edge. It seemed as if time slowed down as he saw the mare walk under the scaffolding and the supplies about to tumble downwards. Pushing himself off the roof he was on, Windbreaker shouted, "Look out!" as he crashed into her, pushing the mare away from where the supplies smashed into the ground. With his heart racing in his head, he looked over the yellow mare to make sure she was okay. "You good, miss?" he asked, offering to help her up while kicking himself inside as he forgot to hide his slur. "Yeah," she replied, her snout wrinkling as she no doubt smelled his breath. Pulling her upright, she thanked him. "No problem, miss." He bowed his head forward as he was taught by the hatchery when talking to a mare. "It's a good thing I was watching what Diamondback was doing, or not doing, or this could have been a lot worse." He turned his head to see Diamond being yelled at by Tight Schedule for the near accident. He turned to the mare and flashed a smile as he patted her on the shoulder. "Really good to see you're okay, miss." "I'm fine," she repeated with a smile on her face that caused his throat to twinge. "Really, I'm all right, and thank you for saving me, Mr. Windbreaker," he replied, swallowing a bit of air and clicking his beak. She seemed to calm down, her smile becoming true. She held out her hoof to him and began to introduce herself when her colt friend flew in the middle of them. "Page Turner!" he shouted as he landed, facing him down and seemingly drawing that sword on his side. "What happened?" The Bat Pony growled at him, his coat on end. Well, two could play that game. "I saved her, buddy," he said in as clear a tone as possible, puffing his chest out. "That idiot over there," he pointed at Diamondback before glancing over at the colt again to see the signet ring on his right wing, telling him this was a direct member of the Blade family and was his boss. Still, he was too caught up in the moment. "Wasn't watching what he was doing and almost dropped a full ton of stuff on her." "Is this true?" he asked the mare, Page Turner, who nodded her head. He turned back to him and bowed his head to him. "I thank you, then, good sir, and both he and you are fired for negligence and improper conduct." "What?" Windbreaker screeched. "I just saved her from being hurt." "And I thank you for that," the idiot hissed at him, as if this was his fault. "And if you do not leave now, I will have security remove you from the premises." He was furious at this, and so close to saying something he knew he'd regret before he stopped himself. Throwing his arms in the air, he stormed off from the ungrateful pony and made a beeline back to the inn. He hated stuck-up noble brats like that foal of a changeling. If any pony spoke up against them, they would do whatever they wanted to get even, and, like an idiot, he opened his beak when he should have scraped and bowed. "Whoa there, birdie buddy!" A female voice chuckled in front of him. It was a minotaur with a dark violet coat and a giant hammer tied to her back. "Where's the fire, and do you need an alibi?" She laughed again, lightly punching him on the arm. Windbreaker roamed her with his eyes, taking in her blue-black mane before snorting and shaking his head. "Get out of my way," he grumbled, moving to get past the overly cheerful mare. "Oh, come on there, pretty birdie. Tell old Vix Lee what's wrong," she chimed in, pivoting on her hooves to stand next to him, pulling her hammer to twirl it in front of them. "I don't see how it's any of your business," he snapped, clicking his beak angrily at her. "It ain't, but it bums me to see someone so glum. So tell me, chum." She turned her hands around quickly, bringing the face of the hammer down onto his head, revealing it was a cloth hammer and not a real one. "What's got your feathers so twisted up?" Smacking the hammer away, he turned to the Minotaur, Vixlay or something like that, and glared at her. "I just got fired for no reason after I saved my boss's life. His mare's life. So if you don't mind, I'm going to go back to my hotel room, get drunk, and pretend this day never happened, all right?" All right, I get it, jeez," she said, holding her hands up at him as if to defend herself from them. "Try to help a person out, and that's what you get. Feh." With a growl and a snort, Windbreaker watched the crazy Minotaur walk away before shaking his head. "At least this day can't get any worse," the Griffin muttered to himself, stalking back to a hotel for a quiet night. As anyone who's been watching will have noticed, I didn't have a lot of pictures on this one like I have with all of my other readings. I decided that it's much easier for me to just do the reading, and I know I normally listen to these things while not even looking at the pictures. So, tell me if you want the pictures back, but otherwise I think I'm just going to leave it without a lot of pictures. Choose one to represent the whole chapter, and I'll be able to produce these easier. Got a lot of things I'm up to. This is just one of them, so it could be a difference between one chapter or 5. Here you go. This is my reading for chapter 4, and now on to the comments on the actual chapter rather than my presentation of it. Windbreaker has a problem. Alcoholism is serious business. Having some alcohol every now and then is alright if you can handle it. But his case was clearly a problem. You need to not let it take control of you. That's a serious issue for some people. I've known someone who has had some trouble with that. It's serious, and it needs dealt with. Take care of yourselves. Take care of those you love. Don't let that happen to them. In the end, it's only the person with the problem who can fix it, but others can help. I wish you the best. Now, I've noticed, I think I've mentioned this before, but every chapter we're getting a slight preview into the next person. The next person is going to be Vixlay, the Minotaur. She seems to be Laughter's attempt. I don't know about this guy. Maybe loyalty, but I'm not sure. I wonder what's going to happen when we get around to number 6. Are we going to get another look at the first one? Because the pattern's not going to be able to have the 7th element, I assume. I'm interested to see how that goes. Anyway, as always, feel free to leave any comments in below that are relevant to the story. And if those comments are just links to sites I find inappropriate and offensive, they will be deleted and you will be banned. Nobody did that on my last episode. Thank you. But people have done that too many times. Don't do that.